Hello, minions, vicarious vultures, vermin, and vampires, and welcome to the third encounter of Oof, that is not good on the throat. Well, God, good morning, good evening, and good night. It is episode 3 of Dude, it's not that hard. The show where we make things simple for you. Now, as my wonderful introduction stated, we're gonna be discussing antagonists today, or villains, whichever you choose to prefer. Last episode, we discussed the protagonist. Now, every good story that has a good protagonist needs a good antagonist. Now, what, pray tell, is an antagonist, I hear you asking? Well, an antagonist is the opposing force of the protagonist. Usually, if you have a hero in your story, the antagonist is your villain. They are the opposing force of your story. If the protagonist drives the story forward, the antagonists are all the forces that get in their way. Now, not all stories require an antagonist, but they do add a lot of spice to your story. The cool thing about antagonists is they don't have to follow the rules that the protagonist generally has to follow in a story. And so this gives you the freedom to do anything you want with the antagonist. However, like with any story, there are some basic rules that you want to follow to make your antagonist as interesting as possible. An antagonist doesn't have to be a person. It can be a force of nature or just anything that gets into the character's way. It can be an element that forces the protagonist to rethink themselves and their journey. In the movie Black Panther, what makes Killmonger such a great villain isn't that he is such a great force against T'Challa, but he forces T'Challa to rethink what makes Wakanda so great a country. He forces T'Challa to rethink what makes a good Wakandan king. And he forces T'Challa to rethink what is Wakanda's role in the world around it. Now, like a good protagonist, a good antagonist or villain can go through their own character arc. Usually, they go through a negative character arc. Sometimes a villain may start off good in the beginning of their story, but end up evil. Say for example, like Anakin Skywalker from Star Wars. He starts off as a hero training to be a Jedi. I love sand! But through the shaping of the world around him and through tragedy, he becomes the villain Darth Vader. I hate sand. Moving one spectrum over, we have our flat arc. Now, a flat arc is, as you would expect, the villain stays the same throughout the story, or in this case, the antagonist. An example of this is really any typical villain in pretty much most stories. In this case, I'll be using the antagonist from the movie Bring It On. The character played by Gabrielle Union stays the same throughout the story. However, because she is so much better than the other cheerleading character played by Kristen Dunst, it forces Kirsten to then improve herself throughout the story. So, because Gabrielle Union has this flat story arc, it forces Kirsten Dunst to change herself, change her cheerleading tactics, and eventually win the cheerleading tournament. Now, I know you're going to ask, but what about positive arcs? Can an antagonist have a positive character arc? Well, duh. Of course a character can have a positive character arc. In the show, The Legend of the Avatar, Zuko is the villain or the antagonist that tries to stop Aang. Now, Zuko is the son of the fire chief, and he is the villain because he's trying to stop Aang from achieving his goal of becoming the Avatar. However, as Zuko progresses through the story, he learns the story of the Avatar. He learns through his uncle Iroh to forgive himself, and he becomes a better character for it. He still changes the main character, who is Aang, but he himself also goes through his own positive change from going from the villainous antagonist into the heroic antagonist. Now, like our protagonist, it's useful to know our antagonist. So you want to create a profile for them as well. What are their likes? What are their dislikes? And what are the things in the world that affects them? This will allow you to know how you want the antagonist to interact with the protagonist in your story. It also makes it easier for you to determine what type of antagonist that you want to create. Maybe you want the anti-hero antagonist who is hated by everyone but has a lovable heart of gold. Maybe you want an antagonist that just wants world domination and wants to burn everything in his path. Maybe you want an antagonist who is just the mean girl who just hates everyone. The important thing is to keep your antagonist as interesting as possible, because a good antagonist makes for an even better protagonist. Now, like with any character, you want to make sure that you avoid certain stereotypes when it comes to antagonists. Your antagonist doesn't always have to be the chatty catty girl. Your villain doesn't necessarily have to be the dark, brooding, dark-skinned villain. You can make your antagonist relatable. You can make them real people, real humans with real struggles, even if they're villains. Just because they're the antagonist for the protagonist doesn't necessarily mean that they don't go through their own struggles as well. Maybe if it's the Dark Lord of a kingdom, what are some of the social structures and social challenges that they have to overcome? In the movie Megamind, the character Megamind has to learn how to get over his sense of inadequacy and loneliness, a topic that a lot of us can relate to. The point is, you can have a villain that explores all sorts of different topics and emotions. It's your story. You can do whatever you want with it. You don't have to settle for the norm. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. There's so many books on how to write interesting antagonists, such as The 1 Hour Guide to Writing Better Antagonists by Mary Lynn Mercer. How to Write Superbad Villains, 13 Steps to Evil by Sasha Black. And as always, my two favorite YouTubers, Jenna Moresi and Hello Future Me. Okay, up till now, we've figured out how to write our story, how to make interesting protagonists, and now we're thrilling antagonists. The next thing we need is to build that world that we want to put them in. I can show you the world. Ooh, I can't wait to build worlds with you. Sometimes in our lives, we can feel like we're the villains. Maybe we did something or hurt someone in a way that we feel like we aren't worthy of forgiveness. But you aren't a villain. As long as we have life, we have an opportunity to undo the wrongs we've done and improve the lives around us. So pick yourself up, vow to do better each day, and take the required action. Remember, you are worthy of love and forgiveness. I believe in you, and I'll see you in the next episode.